Welcome to the Home Building Hub, your essential podcast guide to building your new home. Hosted by industry experts Colin Bischoff and Darren Brennan, this conversational podcast will help better educate you about all things new home building so you can avoid costly mistakes and enjoy your building experience to the fullest, no matter which home builder you choose.
Hey guys, before we kick off on the episode, I want to introduce you to a new phase of the Home Building Hub. We have decided to go back to school, that is SKOOL. We've created a community based on the back of a podcast we've been running for so long now. We've created a community for you, for all home buyers to jump in and get access to a whole range of tools, checklists, information, and most importantly, find other home buyers in there so you can follow people's journeys, you can share your own journey, and we're excited to build the most trusted community that is independent and objective in the whole country. So get in there, it's skoolschool.com. Look up Home Building Hub, download the app, come and say hi, and we will see you in there. Hey there, folks. Welcome to the Home Building Hub. You're with Colin and co-host Darren Brennan. As always, today, Darren, we're going a little bit off the normal path because we sort of deal with the volume stuff most of the time, don't we? And today we thought we'd hit a different topic and talk to those people looking to build that custom dream home and take you through that sort of higher level experience and process a little bit. And rather than us try and ramble on about it, we thought we'd grab an expert. So we've got a lovely gentleman by the name of Nathan Owen. He's come and join us. So Nathan, he spent most of his life working in residential building. He now runs a business called Ground Floor Building Coach and basically works with smaller builders with their systems behind estimating, pre-construction, client communication, and just project control overall. And what we're trying to do today for the listeners is make sure that if you're looking to build a custom home, higher end, dream home sort of stuff, Nathan's going to share. We've sort of got a line of sight on some insights or some tips, about 5 of them we're going to go through and ask a couple of questions here and there to give you guys, I guess, the best understanding and a good heads up before you go out there and start engaging a builder or an architect in any which way or order you want. So, yeah, listen in, guys, if that's you. Welcome along, Nathan. We'd like to say welcome from all the way from Tassie. Is that correct?
That is correct. Down the bottom part in Hobart. So
cool.
Thankfully blessed with a warmer day than usual. So happy today.
There's a chance it's you might be warmer than me. It's unusual to have someone who my chance of being colder than. So
I got to tell you, it's been an odd winter. I think it's the El Nino or La Nina, which it's one of those. I think is floating around. But it's been pretty kind to us this year. So I think got my fair share of vitamin D this winter. So don't have the winter blues at the moment.
Yeah, nice, mate. Nice. That's good. Yeah, well, thanks very much for joining us on the podcast, Nathan. Obviously, maybe a quick rundown on yourself. Colin's given a bit of an intro, but mate, tell us a bit about what you're doing right now.
Right now, I run a small sort of coaching business. Primarily focuses on the newer builder. With the goal of trying to set up systems and methods of building better. But it's ideally to approach it from the perspective of the client, so that you're catering to the client and the client experience, having a far more sort of custom building background than I guess your project home or volume builder. The custom ground seems to be a little bit more flexible and lenient in its movements and so forth. So, helping builders to work in that environment so they catch all the bits and pieces and communicate well with their clients and deliver a result and an experience that is good for them and good for the clients is a nice place to work. So.
Yeah, I'd suggest also those clientele, they're generally expecting that higher level of service, that, one-on-one level of service, that really, culminates in them getting exactly what they're after in this custom home that, and dream home that they're looking to build. So.
Well, that's exactly right. Once you sort of venture into the custom working space, I think from a client's perspective, you're looking for a far more personal experience and involvement, and that you want the flexibility and the ideas and your vision to come to life, which is, I think, I assume, a rather different experience from picking from a plan and from a bunch of selections that are available. Being custom, you're basically unlimited as far as options go, but often limited by how far the dollar will go in order to meet that. So
There's always a
the
budget.
custom builders, sorry,
So there's always a budget.
there's always a budget. There always, unfortunately, that's never unlimited. But the custom builder generally has to navigate between that budget and reality, I guess, and try and help guide the home builder through what they can and can't have and what they can compromise on and what's closest to what they want that falls within their budget. So there's a lot of massaging in that space in order to get to the other end. It's not uncommon to have home designs and contract negotiations and stuff last 2 or 3 years, so there's quite a lengthy personal relationship involved there. So, you've got to look after that and keep track of things and manage it and organize it so that people know where they are. They come back 2 years later and go, "Oh, where were we on that job?"
Yep,
You know, being able to pull that information up and pick up with the client where you left off is a pretty important skill set.
for sure. I guess maybe to kick off on our first true question leading into the 5 I guess tips would be, how do you go about choosing that right custom builder? It's obviously really important, and it's, you know, so key to the end result. It's got to be a match of not only what they can build, but they've got to, you like you said, you're in this, you're almost in a marriage. You're there for, could be
Yeah.
years, so you want to make sure it's someone you like, you trust, you know. Yeah.
Well,
How do
it
you
is.
go about that?
Well, it is a big call, and I don't envy people having to try and make that decision, especially if they don't have a lot of background in making that decision. And I mean, the fear mongering is real in this sort of space. I mean, you watch those current affair style shows and bits and pieces. The bad news is prominent. Everyone's got a terrible story about a builder, so people are nervous when it comes to making that decision about how they're going to pick and choose their builder. And it's easy to get caught up in the flash, the bedazzlement of it all with the social media. You see people building houses and beautiful houses and putting beautiful finishes in and stuff, and the first impression makes that builder potentially look really appealing. And it's not to say that they're not going to be a good builder, but even bad work can look good in the right photo under the right light.
For sure.
And just because the photo looks good doesn't mean that that particular client had a great building experience and comes away feeling great about their homes. So, you know, having a social media presence and so forth is important. It shows they're active. It shows they're proud of their work. It shows they're putting all their stuff forward. So that is a great box to tick, but it's certainly not the only box to tick. I would think things you'd be looking for when it comes to selecting a builder, um, awards and stuff. Now, not every builder could be an award-winning builder, but merely from the fact that they feel enough pride and so forth in their work that they're, putting themselves forward and nominating themselves and putting them into that space, that's a step up or another tick in the right box in my mind that puts people in a space where they are, proud of what they're doing, as opposed to guys who are just chugging along, doing whatever they need to be doing. I think if you talk to your builder and you ask them how they're going to manage you as a client through that experience, not just um, what they can do for you. If your experience with a builder is they're just bragging about their builds and themselves, as opposed to talking and listening and conversing about how you're going to manage your building experience, then that would be a concern for me. So I always put people onto project management software. We're particularly involved with Wonderbuild, which is an Australian one, which helps. But it allows for 24/7 access. It has a client portal, 24/7 access. The builder can communicate through it. The client can communicate through it. So they've got continuous, uninterrupted involvement. And if you have a builder that handles a service like that and can quite clearly lay it all out on the table and keep you involved throughout the process, then that is another big tick in the box.
I think you're
Um,
it's interesting what you say. I'm just thinking about that, the awards side, and I've
yeah,
attended a lot of these awards, and we're always wrapped as builders, volume builders, when you win a display home award or whatever. But it's very different when they're announcing the private builder awards. These custom builder awards, because they actually start talking a lot about the custom and how good the customer was to deal with, and how invited they felt to become part of that customer's life, and
mm.
like it's quite interesting how important not only the end product is, but how important it was to be involved in that person's journey, the homeowner's journey. And it's right. I think you're on the money there. And the other bit I was going to say is, with the social media stuff, you got to be careful these days too with AI. So it can, bit of AI handiwork can tidy up any photo these days. So, you know,
Well, it
trust in
can
what you
do.
actually see, I guess.
But I tell you what, if you've got and I don't mean this to make builders sound bad at all, but there is a reason most builders picked up a hammer for a living, was because they didn't want to sit in front of a computer, which is where a lot of them end up. Um, Once they've been at it for a while. But if you've got a builder who's clued in enough with AI in order to drive that kind of imagery, then maybe they're actually a pretty good find. In that, they've got those computer management skill sets that's probably not super common among a lot of builders, because builders effectively started building so they could build things. So I don't think it comes natural to most of them to run the computer and the systems and even certain levels of communication and so forth. It's a taught skill set in a lot of ways. So, having a builder that I think is open about having a coach even is a good sign, in that you're then involved in dealing with a builder that is seeking help to improve themselves and make themselves better, which I don't think can be taken any way than other than being good. I mean, Michael Jordan still had a coach, best basketball player to ever live.
Yep.
So if he wasn't too proud to have a coach, your builder shouldn't be too proud to have a coach.
Yeah, absolutely. Indeed.
Um,
Good.
what else?
The next one we probably can lead into, I guess, making sure that they're checking off those things you've suggested there around the builder, and I guess their history and customer journey, customer experience, and nominations and awards and things like that. I want to lead more into, who do you talk to first? Because the reality for, I guess, our normal stuff we talk about, greenfield or even people with custom designs, but not that dream home architect up front or architectural separate to the builder, sort of getting that completely drawn up from scratch. Um, we've seen some people bring us plans before that were drawn by an architect, and there was, like, for example, I think before we jumped on this call, I told you about an example we had last week when we were chatting. I can't remember the size of the house. It was like a 20 square house or something. It was not a dream home. It was just a house on a block to get within a budget. The architect, for some reason, had drawn, I think, 8 skylights in this kitchen, and the budget was really tight. And it just sort of led me, like, every time we face that, like, you've got the architect seems not in alignment with the reality of the budget of the client and what the builder can actually build it for. In the custom world, how does that work? Should they go to an architect first, or should they go to a builder first and then the architect after? How do you sort of see that?
It's a great question. And I think that, it's likely that I'm going to answer with a little bit of bias because of my background and so forth, and a lot of people that I deal with. And I'm actually a huge fan of architects. I love architecturally designed homes. I think they'd be boring without them. So, huge architect fan. But having said that, I still think the first port of call should be the builder, uh, because I think you need to set your reality first. In that, you know what your budget is. You can draw on the builder's experience from previous jobs, um, and pricing to determine what size and materials and things should be in it, so that you basically help with the builder developing a scope and a set of rules and criteria to give to the architect, or building designer. It doesn't always have to be a massive architectural job to be custom. So once you've got those parameters and so forth in place, like this big, these kind of materials, this range of tapware and finishes or whatever, you then have a much better scope and concept of works to be able to give to the architect in order to say, here's my parameters for what I want to build, this size, this many bedrooms, whatever. Then your architect or designer can then start working within a more realistic set of scope. My concern is going the other way, that, um, you've got people going to build a home, and quite often there's almost zero home building experience. For most people, they'll do it once. So it'll be their first time. I don't know what the percentages are, but I imagine that would be huge comparatively to people going on to multiple builds. So they go in all starry eyed, they talk to the architect, they talk about all the things that they could do. Growth happens within the build, and, you know, architects don't price homes. So that kind of level of what things are going to cost is somewhat detached, I would think, from what the builder would bring to the table. So yeah, I think builder first. Builder then helps you with the scope and your range, and then due to their experience and relationships with architects and building designers, could help you to determine whether you do need an architect or you could get by with a designer, and which particular designer is going to be best suited to what you want to build, because you might favor lots of concrete and big glass windows and all that kind of stuff. And, they're likely to know which designers work in that kind of field and are familiar with it in order to better design and encapsulate that kind of thing. Or you might be very much into energy efficiency and smaller conservative house buildings that perform well rather than looking, super magnificent, in which case you find guys that work in that space, which, you need to know that as well before you go to the builder, because builders generally work in a niche themselves. So if you're
Yeah.
glass and concrete and big and fantastic, or energy efficient and, a little bit more conservative about performance and stuff, then, you know, just sort of spreading back to how you choose your builder, you also want to identify whether the niche that they work in is compatible. And if the builder's niche is compatible, usually they're going to have a range of designers that are also compatible for your niche or type of home that you're wanting to build.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. You can really see how they both have to align, don't they? They have to link together too. Like it's so important to get that part right.
Well, it should be treated as a collaboration.
Yeah.
So you again, I'm a big advocate for the builder being involved in a consulting capacity from the very early stages, if not the first stage. And I've always thought of the designer, architect, and the builder as like the left and right side of the brain. One's the creative side and one's the logical, pragmatic side. And you put the two of them together, and then you problem solve your way through to the most artistic house that you can create within a reasonable budget and use of materials. So,
Mm.
two pieces make the whole.
Yeah.
And in fairness to architects, if a client comes to them and gives them, it's a blank sheet of paper and says, there's no limitations, no parameters, and of course they're going to design what they feel is best for that customer,
Correct.
and that may be well misaligned to ultimately what is required once the client goes to a builder and learns about the I guess the parameters of budget and the size that fits on that block and all those sorts of things. So yeah, it's just logical that you would go to a builder first, and actually probably gives your architect a much better chance to provide you with an accurate, more realistic solution, I would have thought.
Yeah. So, I mean, in some ways, you're almost borrowing from I guess, the project volume home space, in that in reality, when you go to a project builder who has all their in house designs, you're approaching a builder first there,
Mm.
and then you're looking through the designs they have available that suit your budget. The custom home space is really just a custom reflection of that. Finding your builder first that fits your niche, understands your budget, has a good concept due to their experience and history of what things cost and how they're built, can then guide you towards the space where you can select the designs. So it's just that same process, but in a custom space.
Yeah, for sure. It's good. Yeah, makes so much sense. Talk to us a bit about why people really need to they've got to reveal their hand in terms of their budget. Like no point them coming in, like you said, Cole, and giving nothing and then, wasting a whole lot of time to find out that they can't afford it. Like you're better off coming in and saying, "I've got whatever it is, $1,000,000. I've got $2,000,000." Because it disappears pretty quick when you get into custom builds. Like it can,
Oh yeah.
and you almost want to have I'd assume. And again, I've never custom built myself, so I don't know that, but I know friends who have, and it's generally cost them more than they anticipated.
Uh yeah, that's almost exclusively a trait of custom building,
Yep.
unfortunately. um, you can get like really sort of higher end architectural designs done where they can pick absolutely everything, which then leads to a far more concrete um, building price as far as fixed contracts go. Or you can get more bare bones custom designs done where you haven't selected tiles and taps and bits and pieces, which puts you in a lot of allowances space, which often due to probably a lack of communication is often where you see some of the expansion in the prices and so forth happening. So, you know, why the budget discussion needs to be honest and upfront, and why you effectively need to have picked a builder that has a good reputation and works in your niche and so forth, is that in order to make sure everything meets your budget, you have to know what the budget is in order to try and help you hit that target. What I've found, and this is probably a bit of a personal anecdote along with stories of other builders, personal anecdotes and so forth, is a lot of people give the builder a budget that is less than what they actually have to play with. All right.
It's almost
And
human nature though to do that, isn't it?
well, I think due to like the media fear mongering and so forth with builders is that if you're like, right, I've got $1 million to build, but if I tell the builder it's $1 million, he's going to spend all of it, and it's going to
Yeah.
cost $1 million.
Yeah.
All right. But if I tell him it's 800,000, then he'll come in as close to 800,000 as possible, which should help me stay underneath my budget. It's like, well, if that's how you're going to start your working relationship with your builder in a place effectively that's, is there a nicer word than dishonest? But, maybe
Misleading.
reserved, untrusting.
Yep.
So yeah, dishonest, disregard that. That's the wrong word. But, untrusting due to all your external factors and information. Jerry down at the pub had a terrible building experience, so don't trust your builder.
Yep.
But if you're doing your groundwork in selecting your builder and you work out who they are and you're comfortable with them and you're going into it where it's like, well, I may as well trust them until they show me reason to not trust them, then you've got to be honest with your budget. All right. Because if you want to build what you want, the builder needs to know what you've got to play with in order to help make that happen. Now, I would say the opposite is then true when it comes to the designers, in that you do tell them that you have less than you have. And I say that for a reason, because when you first start your building process and you have no plans and nothing to work with, the very first thing you've got is, well, I want to build a 200 square meter house. You're like, okay, that's a random number, but let's start with it. You want to build a 200 square meter house, and you've got $1 million to play with, which means you're roughly sitting at $5,000 a square meter. The builder can then determine, is it likely that I could build the house that they're describing for $5,000 a square meter? His experience will tell him or her, sorry, that's a slip of the tongue, that, in this building climate for that type of house on that hill with that much glass and so forth, 5,000, no, not going to cut it. To me, this is like a $6,500, $7,000 a square meter house. And I don't know how pricing's going in Victoria and stuff for things at the moment, but that is certainly not uncommon in the custom building space with a lot of people that I talk to. Custom generally costs more because you're getting what you want. So that conversation then goes, all right, well, what you're looking at is probably going to cost $6,500, $7,000 a square meter. If we reverse engineer that, that'll give us a house size that's a little bit smaller. But you could still have, this much glass and this deck and this much of this and so forth, and we work within that space. And then when you get from that point and you go to talk to the designer, you want to tell the designer that you're working with effectively less, because they'll do the same thing. They'll go, all right, X amount of dollars per square meter multiplied by floor space. That's how much floor space I've got to work within. But the reason you want them to start with a smaller budget and perhaps being more conservative is when it comes to custom building, that's the footprint and the size of the home. You're always going to have driveways, fences, scaffold, external steps.
Yep.
Maybe you're a bit out of suburbia and you've got to have water tanks or an AWTS or septic system.
Yep.
These are all external costs outside of the footprint of the home. So, that needs to be part, I guess, of the reality side of the conversation, where it's, these are how your costs work. We want to have $150,000 out of that million off to one side to cover these outside of house anomalies and work with this amount of money internally. And of course, it's also knowing the difference between, I've got $1 million to build. Is that $1 million for the house and you've got $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 for design and engineering and council fees and all of that kind of stuff. So you need to almost draw a line in your budget. This much money is for the design element and this much money is for the building element. But
Yep.
you'll be searching around in the dark effectively if people don't really know how much you've got to work with. And I would approach the design side more conservatively with how much money you've got to play with, and the builder side more realistically, because then they can compare apples and apples.
Yep.
Yeah, that works exactly the same no matter what size home you're building, whether it's a custom or a volume in that case. Because
Yeah.
we've seen that and dealt with that for a long time, and customers come up and give you a budget. Our advice has always been on this podcast is you give a minimum budget and a maximum budget, and you say, here's what I want to spend, here's what I cannot go a dollar over. Let's find a way to meet in the middle, and that client will have to sacrifice some of those things. At least the builder's got a transparent range to deal with. And in this event, or in this case, the same thing applies, and they can say, okay, well, here's what we think, and you got to have your 150 set aside for all the stuff that does come up, those unknowns that a client's not thinking about, water retention systems. Like they're thinking about what sort of, kitchen do I want? But all these other things are real and they matter. And a builder cannot actually provide that information up front. It's not possible. So I was going to ask you though, like one of the other things you'd mentioned the other day and maybe elaborate was one thing is getting a builder that can give you that great information, but also understanding as a customer that that's not free. Pre-construction work with any builder realistically is not free, but particularly with customer to be on a next level, would it not?
Yeah, and I think if you're going into a custom build experience where you want to bring the builder in early, as opposed to what I would call an archaic model, which is design and then going out to tender, which has a extraordinary fail rate, as far as I understand it. Having that builder involved as a professional consulting, you would pay for that service. So, a lot of good builders who understand their value will put a dollar value on that experience. And if a client is not willing to pay that, that is generally a signal to the builder that the client doesn't value the builder's professional input, which, makes not for a great dynamic. I mean, you're going to pay the architect for their consulting input, the engineer for their consulting work and input, the building surveyor, the soil testing, all that kind of stuff. Why is the builder free? And the builder is assumed to be free because they really backed themselves into a hole many, many years ago when they thought a good advertising model was, call us for a free quote. Well, I mean, I feel like that's the dumbest thing builders could have ever done to themselves, because now they get stuck with tire kickers and people who are coming through just for the price. So you want to avoid that. And a quality builder wants to work with people who value their input and what they have to offer, not just the free quote. And let's not forget, you effectively get what you pay for. So, one of the things I would ask from a builder, just to go back to the earlier part when it comes to selecting a builder, is ask them, what does your quote presentation and experience and stuff looks like? So you can see an example of the quote they're going to hand over. And if you've got a guy who's saying, yeah, come to us for a free quote, chances are, not always, but chances are you're going to get 3 pieces of paper printed on a Word document that generalize the plans and your entire building experience with lump sum figures for, your sanitary fixtures and items, $5,000. It's like, all right, well, what does that buy me? How much does that cost? So you're getting a quick throw out meter rates kind of quote, but more or less that's what you paid for because you didn't pay anything. because it was free.
Yeah.
If you're going to pay for the builder's consulting experience, then what you would hope to get, depending on how much you're paying, is a quote that's like 30 pages long, itemized accounts of all your provisional and prime cost items, what they've excluded, what they've included, what they've itemized and allowed for, a detailed scope of work for what's in it. But you'll also get a an estimating service right from the outset. So when you have the first concept drawings and stuff come out from the designer after working with the builder, pardon me, you might have your 150 square meter home. The consulting builder who's involved and who you're paying could take that away, price it based on experience, because he's actually got something to measure now. So you can get a whole bunch of the materials, windows, work out some labor, all that kind of stuff. Get a reasonable estimation together. That gives you a dollar figure for what you're working towards. All right. Once you have that dollar figure, you can decide whether that's inside or outside of my budget. Now, you might have paid a few grand to your architect or designer at this point to get to that concept stage, and you might have paid a couple of grand to your builder. So let's say you're 5 grand in. Wouldn't you rather be $5,000 in to find out the house that you want is $200,000 to $300,000 more than you can afford? Or do you want to be $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 into the designer and going out to tender and then finding out that it's $200,000 or $300,000 more than you can afford?
Yeah.
So I mean, I'd rather lay out 5 grand and know that, this doesn't have a future, or I can change it when it's the most cost effective to change it to show that it does have a future, as opposed to I've spent $60,000 and now I've got to go back to the designer and get it redesigned, which is going to cost me, I don't know how many more thousands of dollars that is, to bring it back to then what? Go back out to tender again and then find out it's still $150,000 over.
Yeah.
So, paying the builder for their professional input, I think is essential. I think it has the potential to save you tens of thousands of dollars, to pay them some thousands.
Yeah, absolutely. Like advocacy as such, you're paying for the
Right.
expertise and finding you the right solution. And it's like people need to look at builders as teammates, not opponents, is probably to sort of summarize, the way that
Yeah.
needs to be looked at. You mentioned about designs, and I'm just keen to know a little bit about anyone who's thinking about that process now. What are some of the things in terms of customizing? What should you, or what are some of the considerations you should have in your mind when you're thinking about customizing a design to get it the way you want it to be?
Well, that is a very broad question. It's how long is a piece of string in a lot of ways. I mean, you've got, you've got conservative, you've got, really expansive, you've got energy efficient. The list goes on, and then there's all different combinations and sizes of that. So, environment is obviously a huge factor, depending on where you live and where you're facing and how you want to incorporate your views and stuff is a pretty big factor. I come from a bit of a energy efficient background, so I did passive house training, that German super efficient building system. So I'm a big believer in energy efficient type building and performance based building. So, incorporating, as sort of a minimum, the sun and, utilizing that natural energy to assist, even if you can't go full blown German passive house building, you could use elements from all of these things to help. So you've got views, you've got orientation, size is another big one. How much size do you really need? I mean, Australia, I believe, build some of the biggest houses in the world,
Mm.
comparative to other countries and even, you know, Western capitalized countries who have, I guess, the same sort of culture and modeling and stuff that we do. Um, the amount of people that fit per square meter in our houses is, I'm pretty sure we're the biggest. But why do you need to be that big? So, are you building for size because other people have built for size? In a lot of cases, the valuation and so forth, because I think banks and so forth value the wrong elements of a home. I would value performance and style and quality over just size and how many bedrooms it has. But I don't own a bank, so maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. But size is one. Do you need massive bedrooms, or do you need just enough room to put your bed and store your stuff in? Does it make more sense to have a bigger family living space so that you're utilizing the family and everything together? Are you entertainers? Do you really want to incorporate inside and outside and use that whole entertaining space? Do you love cooking? Does cooking become part of your house? Is your house built around that cooking kitchen experience and so forth? Do you hate maintenance? You see a lot of places go up that have like all the timber work and all that kind of stuff, and it looks beautiful,
Yeah.
but you've got to oil that stuff all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are you designing to give yourself a maintenance nightmare, and you like, well, I don't even like to go out and mow the lawn for 20 minutes on the weekend, and I've only got a 30 square meter patch of grass. So this is what custom design affords you effectively, that you can model the house around your way of living. So big family dinners, entertaining, and then that's your centerpiece, and you kind of build it around that. You're away all weekend and you don't want to mow the lawns and that kind of stuff. Maybe you're looking for a smaller block that really just caters for the house, so there's nothing to worry about outside. You're not going to maintain the timber work, so maybe your material selections revolve around stuff that just doesn't need maintenance. So you're giving yourself a maintenance-free living environment. It's a big list and a lot of things to think about, but the right builder and the right designer should be picking your brain for these bits of information in order to help you prioritize what it is you're really looking for. So that you're not confusing yourself with, I saw a great house on the block that had these things, so I want that. But yeah, but are you going to use that? Are you
Yeah.
going to maintain that? Like, do you
Yeah.
really want that, or it just looked good? So
But that's why you need a good builder and designer to help hold your hand through that, because it is overwhelming. So you can only go off the reference you see off those sorts of programs or whatever it may be, displays and whatnot. So yeah, it all does go back to the main point you said earlier is, you need to get someone who knows what they're doing and yeah, treat it like a relationship, because then you'll get the right, I guess the right path laid out for you so you can help prioritize what those priorities are. That's probably the hardest part initially. So that makes sense. Yeah.
well, you're building a team effectively, because I mean, let's face it, you're going to be stuck with your builder for at least a year, up
Mm.
to
Yep.
2 or 3, depending on your whole design and custom building experience and so forth. So building that team, you need someone who listens to what you want, but I think you also need someone who tells you how it is. And you
Yeah.
need to be as the owner in that experience, broad-minded enough to go, well, I hired a professional for a reason, so I should listen to their advice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Nice.
Talk us through their fifth point, making selections and resolving allowances before signing, because it sort of leads into the same of where we've just sort of come from, but I think it
Mm.
sort of pulls it all together at the end.
Yeah, well, I like this point. I think this is an important point. Um, so again, depending on where you're starting, like I think I mentioned earlier, you could have, the top of the range designer and just leave it with them, and they'll select every tap and every tile and every paint color, and you'll be fully interior designed. And so then when the builder prices based off that, they've got every selectable item to price, which then gives you the most fixed price contract you can possibly hope for. Because if you've picked whatever tap and that tap's $300, then that $300 is in the contract and it becomes a fixed price and it's no longer variable. Once you start moving down the range of architects, potentially into building designers and so forth, what you see a little bit more of is you'll have the house designed and the bones of it is all worked out, but you'll have taps, tiles, carpet, paint colors, bench tops, all of these sorts of things, vanities, door handles, all of these sorts of things are left a bit open and they're not selected, which puts the builder in a position where they're like, well, I don't actually know what the client wants here, which puts you in basically two options. You're either trying to communicate with the builder and the client to each other as to what the allowance should be. It's like, what kind of taps do you like? I like these kind of taps. You go, all right, well, they're really expensive. So let's build you an allowance that covers expensive, so that when you actually go to select stuff later on, your budget should theoretically be on the higher end and cover a lot of that.
Yep.
Because you've now working with a variable factor in your fixed price contract, provisional sum prime cost items. So you have a fixed price, but you've got all of these elements in there that are still remaining flexible and moving around. Now, and this might tread on some toes, so I apologize to anyone who takes offense from this, but when you have two builders competing against each other, and you're getting free quotes and they haven't taken the time to talk to you about your wants and your finishes and all of that kind of stuff, because that's unlikely to happen with free quoting, you might get a builder that produces a very budget range allowance for taps and finishes. And then you're looking at the bottom dollar of the entire quote and going, oh, that's reasonable. This other builder's $100,000 more. But why is that builder $100,000 more? Because they've got a higher range of all of those fixed price, provisional sum items. They have allowed much higher range taps and stone bench tops and, plush carpet with a good quality underlay. So you're not really comparing apples with apples. You get stuck looking at the bottom line, and that bottom line with that low figure is tempting. But then what ultimately happens is you go through the building price process with the cheaper guy, and then the variations start coming in.
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh, I like this tap. And you're like, oh, well, that tap's actually $200 more than the tap I allowed for. I like this carpet, or that carpet's $3,500 than one I allowed for. So, that sort of stuff starts happening, which, is where contingency sums and stuff come in. There's I think there's an industry standard is you should allow 10%. But that 10% comes about because you haven't taken the time to detail and work those things out. So if you've got a builder, which I advise doing, that you've paid for and you're having that relationship with, if you're then, I don't know what I want as far as taps and stuff go, but I like this kind of thing, and you have a really healthy allowance built in, then when it comes later on down the track and you're making your selections, you should get plus and minuses and more or less finish around that value allowance. Your tap might cost a little bit more, but your toilet might be a little bit less.
Yep.
Your basin might be a little bit more, but your heated towel rail might be a little bit less. That kind of thing. Tiles a bit more, carpet a bit less. That kind of stuff works out. So you want that experience if you're not comfortable picking everything beforehand. But I would advise trying to pick as much as you can beforehand. if you could pick your tiles, if you could pick your carpet, if you could settle on your bench tops, if you could settle on your taps and all that kind of stuff, and you can give your builder, here's my shopping list of all the things that I want, your contract can then be priced based on selected items rather than allowances. And then they all become fixed. So the amount of your contract that is then flexible reduces greatly, giving you a much more fixed price contract base, leading you to have far less contract price fluctuations down the line because you've settled most of its stuff before you've signed the contract.
Yep.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it really? Just,
Makes
again,
sense.
you're
Yeah.
not setting yourself for failure, you're setting yourself for success. And, walking into that with eyes wide open.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So, but I mean, that's where a lot of people come unstuck. And I think that what you find is when you have a contract, particularly if you're getting a loan, you take the contract to the bank and you get the loan. And round numbers, you've got a loan for $1 million. The bank is going to go, okay, we valued this house, it's $1 million. Within that $1 million, if you've got $100,000 worth of provisional allowance-based pricing, the bank doesn't care. They're like, yep, that's fine. It's still $1 million. That's what you get. But if your allowance-based pricing blows out by 50,000, the bank just doesn't give you another 50,000 to cover that blowout. That has to come out of your pocket.
Yep.
You have to provide that, or work out where you could do variations to save money in order to stay under that $1 million budget and make compromises. But if you had worked out all of those taps and bits and pieces beforehand, and your contract price was then $1,050,000, the bank would probably still go, "Yep, no worries. Here's $1,050,000." I mean, I'm being probably a bit too easygoing and casual with the bank. We know it's not that easy, but you get the idea. Like if you qualify for $1 million, you're probably not too far off qualifying for $1,050,000.
Yeah.
In which case, having higher allowance figures, provisional sum and prime cost items going into the contract actually does you a favor because you're covering those variables. So then you don't have to go back to the bank or anything for more money. And maybe then it actually turns out that I've got a $5,000 or $6,000 difference in the taps and stuff as opposed to a $50,000 difference. Well, you'd much rather have to try and come up with $5,000 out of your own pocket than $50,000. So
Absolutely.
build those things up to a real point of reality so that the money you're getting from the bank is covering, those properly priced prime cost and provisional sum items.
Yep.
Excellent.
Yeah, indeed.
Well, that's point number 5 covered. So, firstly, I guess, Nathan, we want to say thank you for your time, for coming on and sharing tips in an area that we don't spend or dive too much time or dive into or spend too much time into, I should say, Darren. But it's good to get some of those insights. So thank you for coming on. Plenty of tips and tricks and insights for anyone looking to build that custom home. Make sure you go to what we hear very clearly, go to the builder first, be open, honest with your budget, and make sure that you get an understanding of what it is that the project's going to look like. Get those parameters and priorities in line, and then get yourself designer or architect somewhere in between to make sure that you are building your team of people to make sure you have the best success rate. So, yeah, some really good things there. Thank you very much for joining us, Nathan. To wrap that up, guys, we just want to say thank you always for listening, for watching. And if you've got any feedback, jump on our website. That's homebuildinghub.com.au. If you want to learn a little bit more, get some resources, go to school.com and type in Home Building Hub. And then if there's any builders listening to this, what about your website there, Nathan? How can they find you?
It's groundfloorbuildingcoach.com. And email is info@groundfloorbuildingcoach.com.
Beautiful. Excellent.
That's awesome.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
No, thank you
Morning,
so
Nathan.
much for having me. This was great. I really appreciate it.
Cheers, mate. It's quite enlightening for us too to learn, pick up on some new tips and tricks as well. So it's great, mate. Appreciate it.
Well, hopefully it's been good advice for someone and it's helped them out.
Yeah, no, indeed. Cheers.
Cool. Thanks, guys. We'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for listening to the podcast, guys. And just our disclaimer, whilst we're all about providing value to you, this podcast should not be considered as legal or financial advice. It contains general information only, and you should seek out independent professional advice on your personal situation before making any legal or financial decisions.
1, 2,